Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Tom Farrey, the Executive Director of the Aspen Institute's Sports and Society program, and we are obviously shepherds of Project Play, the mission of which is to build healthy communities through sports. And our team has made a pivot over the past month or so to providing essential resources for the array of stakeholders in this disjointed landscape. Is dealing with the COVID crisis now. Where's this headed? What do I do? And so we're doing our best to produce news and information, webinars, other materials, resources. There's more in the pipeline as well. So in our first webinar last week, we explored what the future of youth sports might look like in our current landscape with key national industry leaders. The next few weeks, starting with this webinar, we will work to address specific needs of key stakeholders, youth sport leaders, coaches, and parents. In this webinar, we will focus specifically on youth sport leaders in nonprofits, teams, and park and rec departments who are tackling issues related to this pandemic. We will explore the recommendations around how organizations should tackle access to revenue from donors and government resources, managing expenses, staffing and requests for refunds, and communication with parents, youth, and the broader community. We want you to participate as well. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You can participate in three different ways. Number one, event polls. You will see three of them pop up on your icon at the bottom that you can click and please weigh in there. We got some great results last week. We were able to take the temperature of the environment. So hold on here, make sure video is on. Yes, I think it's on. Sorry, I'm getting a text message from somebody. All right, also chat function. You can click the icon at the bottom of your screen to share your thoughts. John, our editorial director, will be hosting part of the conversation and he'll be posting related links. Also, there's Q&A. So click the icons to send your question to our speaker that we will address in the final 15 to 20 minutes of this session. You've got plenty. We're going to catalog them, consolidate, and put them back out to our panelists. So we will post a summary of the conversation after the webinar. We hope you share that and a recording of the webinar on social, with the hashtag Project Play, and tag us at Aspen Inst Sports. Today, we are joined by three leaders in the youth sports field to help make sense of this moment by looking back and ahead. Our panelists are Brendan Tuohey, co-founder and president of PeacePlayers International, a top sports-based youth development organization. Brendan is a veteran in this space and has a lot of veteran leadership learnings to share as we move through this. Lisa Frates, who is executive director of the Bethesda Soccer Club, one of the top organizations that provides travel teams in her sport, really on the East Coast. And Jack Castle, who is sports administrator for the Columbus, Ohio Recreation and Parks Department, a significant park and rec out there. And he's a veteran of the 2008 recession as well, and he's going to have a lot to offer you. So welcome to all of you, and let's get started. So also these polls, remember, they're going to pop up and we're going to show one now, I believe, where we want to get a sense of how you expect the COVID-19 crisis to impact your program revenue over the next year. More revenue, no change, and then certain degrees of losses. So please share your thoughts there. So related to youth sport funding, here are the top three things that our leaders say we need to be thinking about in the current landscape related to youth sport funding. Number one, be transparent with partners about your challenges. Number two, communicate and be flexible, especially with refunds. And number three, use the crisis to diversify your funding streams. So we're going to work through each of those. First off, Brendan, funders right now are assessing which organizations are going to go out of business and which of them are going to be viable and be there in a few months. At the same time, they're real challenges. So talk to us about why transparency with partners is so important right now.
Well, I think honesty and transparency is always important, whether you're dealing with partners or staff or other stakeholders. I think in times of crisis, partners will really appreciate you coming to them with your challenges sooner rather than later and engaging them in working through the challenges. That way, they can have an even further stake in your success. And you use the term partners, not funders or donors or anything else. And true partnership is really about collaboration. And as you work together through times of stress, realizing that your funders and your financial partners, they can bring lots of things to bear, other than contributions or money related. A lot of kind of non-financial resources that you can find really can help you weather the challenging times. And importantly, it's also really critical that you recognize the challenges that partners have themselves, whether it be the individuals that you're working with or their organizations, and thinking through, hey, how can I help them? Well, that could mean something as simple as, if you're in the position to do it, deferring, funding for a month or time period, further engaging employees, working with them to collaborate with their other partnership organizations, and really step into their shoes. And what you'll see, I think, is if you do that right, and you end up out of this crisis having an even stronger partnership.
Mm-hmm. Is that what happened? I mean, you navigated PeacePlayers through the last economic recession. I mean, this is a real world example to build on. I mean, how did your funders respond, and where did you net out?
Yeah, well, we ended up in a really good place. It was very tough. I mean, I told you this story where I can remember sitting at my desk in 2008, really seeing no scenario in which our organization existed. 2 months from then, just because of the challenge around finances. But the other kind of tendency is to take too much responsibility on your own individual shoulders. And I viewed it for the first part of the downturn as, this is my fault. If I go and tell people what, the tough financial strait we're in, they're going to think less of me or be less willing to help, when that actually was the opposite. And we were able to engage our board members and key donors, although it took a little while, and really have them work with us and take ownership with us of this crisis. And so we came out and we actually changed our whole organizational structure, which enabled us to do a much better job diversifying our funding. We were able to really increase our relationships with our international sites, where we were before 2008. I think we worked around the globe, but we were seen as a US organization. And that enabled us really to live into what we talked about, or we tried to talk about before that, in terms of being collaborative and building local ownership. But that experience really forced us in a very positive way to develop an organizational structure and legal structure that fed into having real local ownership rather than just talking about it.
Right. Now, Lisa, your funders are your customers. They are the parents of players of your teams. I forget how many
we have 1,200 players.
1,200 players, right? So we need best practices to share about communicating with them and keeping them on board.
One of the big things is just kind of reminding people how the landscape is actually put together. When you have, it's not just people show up at a place and play a game. There are referees, there are leagues, there are governing bodies, and sharing with them the information about everything is connected is really important, so that they have some sort of insight into decision-making that the organization is going through as we try and weigh options, but we are also limited by those structures. And sharing that information with parents can be very helpful, so that they have some insight and feel some ownership into the club. And it also reconnects them to your organization, that it's a group, it's a family, it's all of us doing something together. It's not somebody in a room making a decision for them.
Right. Now, how do you deal with, and this is a big one, how do you deal with refund requests? I mean, on one hand, you want to do right by your organization. There are some, fixed costs that you have. and you've got to keep the organization viable. On the other hand, especially today, a parent may really need that money. How are you handling that?
Yeah, like you said, it goes back to communication. And, just at a very top level, I think organizations are looking at what fixed costs are versus, programming that has been delivered and what hasn't been delivered. And also, what are they trying to do in the meantime? So you may be working on pushing out new product that you didn't actually have in your repertoire before. So I think there's an opportunity there. Refunds are always going to be complicated, particularly when everybody is going through a financial crisis together as a group. So you want to make sure that you're sensitive to that. And for a nonprofit, a best practice obviously is you want to be responsive to your customers' needs. But if you're small, you might need to spread things out and be very creative. Look at potentially doing refunds or credits over a 2-year period, or offering percentage discounts on some of your products, or working to partner with some other organizations to get creative in your programming so that you can really offer something of value to people.
Mm-hmm. How many, have you gotten any requests so far?
We've actually it's been surprisingly low. And I think that's a tribute to our parents themselves and their understanding that our club's been around for 40 years. And we've been working very hard to provide the best product out there and making sure that even now we've created a virtual academy. So our kids probably are getting a lot more contact with their coaches than they actually were on field. So, we've been able to pivot in this time and offer almost a new level of product.
Right. So you're providing value during the so-called downtime.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Jack, what about you? From a Park and Rec's point of view, how are you working with refund requests?
Well, I think Lisa provided some great alternatives. However, we have a lot less flexibility working in a city and working with an auditor's office. So we've been limited to doing refunds for services that were not obtained or not given. So we've been processing refunds. I've talked to some other cities who do have a little bit of flexibility in offering credit for when we do come back. If they have space reserved, they can use that elsewhere. But we've processed over 5,000 refunds, almost $450,000 to date.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at the poll results here. It's really kind of interesting. The highest ones are refund most costs except items already paid for, meaning administrative fees and uniforms, 29%. 30% say offer future credit instead. And then the next most popular option of that is offer a full refund now to anyone. Do those results surprise you at all? I don't know, Lisa?
No, not really. I think, people are really trying to be responsive and realistic. It comes down to what you're actually capable of doing. And looking at some financial modeling and looking at your cash flows and trying to do the best that you can for your clients and for your kids. And at the same time, wanting to be able to live to fight another day.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Jack, let me ask you, what's happening with Park and Rec budgets right now? And given the budgetary constraints, what are ways people might go about considering how to diversify their revenue streams?
Well, from a budget perspective, we're seeing a wide range. At minimum, we're looking at putting in restrictions on spending, but really going through a strong process of any type of purchasing and looking at that purchase and making sure that it's absolutely needed at this time. And they're also looking at savings or money that was not spent during this shutdown already. So obviously they're looking at recapturing some of that money to help offset loss of revenue further down the line to help balance the budgets as best they can. But we're also seeing some rec departments that are actually experiencing layoffs in mass numbers and temporary furloughs. And so I think the longer this goes on into summer, that might become more of the norm. Many cities are tax-based and they get their revenue from taxes. And with about 50%, 55% of the businesses being shut down right now, that's going to put a strain on not only this year, the rest of this year, but the 2021 budgets.
Right, and the stimulus bill really has no support for Park and Recs in there.
Not at this time.
Not at this time. There is support for businesses and for nonprofits of a certain size or smaller. But Brendan, how much relief do you expect from the stimulus bill for organizations in this space?
Well, I would use the word hope rather than expect. So we were able to get our application in, pretty early and have a great relationship with our bank. But there are, I think there's some confusion around both timing and will the funding run out and just the capacity of the SBA to manage. So we are hoping, but we are not planning on proceeding. We're moving forward with our budgeting as if it won't come.
Mhm. What about you, Lisa? And who is, as far as you know, receiving funds, and any advice on how to optimize your chances? Oh, Lisa's on mute.
Sorry about that. I was going to say it doesn't seem to be really a reliable pattern so much as it is, it seems small banks seem to have been a little bit quicker than some of the larger institutions. I do know some sports organizations who've been funded, but it's a know your client type of basis. So it should be your bank that you're working with. I know, for us, we're still in a holding pattern for any of the federal assistance from the SBA loans or the PPP.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the second topic here, managing operations. Here are the top three things that we've crowdsourced to this point that leaders say we need to be thinking about in the current environment related to managing organizational operations. Number one, control costs where possible. Number two, be responsive to staff needs. And three, collaborate with similarly situated organizations. So let's work through each one of those. Building on what you just said a few minutes ago, Jack, maybe go into a little more detail. How do you assess what costs need to be cut in an environment like this?
Well, it's a difficult balance between what needs to be done and what we actually have on hand to spend. But we're actually taking this time to reevaluate all of our processes and how often we do things and why we do things the way we do. So it may mean that, normally we went to a site 3 times a week and did an application on the grass. We're cutting that back to once. But the reality also comes down to labor is where the most expense is. And so in Columbus, we have a facility, Berliner Sports Park, which is a large ball diamond complex, and it's a tournament atmosphere, and there's 31 diamonds there, so it takes a lot of people. Normally, we have about 30 part-time staff at this time of year, and right now we're running that with 3 full-time and 7 part-time staff. So there have been some cuts made, and proactively not hiring people at this point in time.
Yeah, Lisa, how do you look at the what to cut in terms of costs?
Well, I think we're doing a combination of new school and old school. Now we have seen what you can do virtually, so it's giving us some opportunity there to potentially cut down on some face-to-face and some travel. And that's another thing is our teams have been traveling significantly all over the country, essentially, if you're at top level in soccer. So how can we get together with some of our like-minded and like-sized organizations and start being creative about creating our own programming that's going to best meet our needs and our clients moving forward in the next year and the next 5 years? Travel is going to be expensive. People may be a little bit shy from engaging in top level sports if they have to travel significantly. So how can you use your partners to build something that's great for the sport, great for the kids, and really delivers?
Yeah, and that actually touches on a third point that we made there about collaborating with similarly situated organizations. You're already starting to do that in terms of sharing knowledge in the DMV, yes?
Yeah, it's been great. We actually, what started as kind of a small conversation has ballooned into 85 different clubs and facilities and event managers within the DMV area where we've come together. We have our own Slack group. We share resources. Why should everybody be incurring costs from a lawyer or an accountant when, one person can and we can share that information? If we're looking at cutting costs, that's a great way to do it, is to share resources. We may be fiercely competitive on the field, but we also want every kid to have a good experience, and we want to make sure that they're safe, and we want to make sure that kids keep playing soccer for the love of the game. So how can you get together with others and use your strengths together? That could be something like, going to your local municipalities to talk about fields. That could be looking at your whole event structure for tournaments. It could be your leagues coming down the pipe for next year. use the talents of what exists in your community, because there's a reason you're all here. There's a reason there's greatness in these sports communities. So look around you and figure out how you can really leverage what you've got.
Yeah, so many challenges with this crisis, but there are definitely some innovations, and connecting of silos within a particular community is one of the best things we've started to see already unfold. Brendan, let me ask you, how do you, in terms of staffing, how do you manage staffing matters in times like this? Who to furlough, who to lay off, how you communicate that with your staff, et cetera.
So we were kind of in a period of fairly rapid growth. So, the first considerations were around, all right, what do we do? What do we stop planning on doing in terms of, going into new areas and expanding staff? And again, having, really open conversations with our team, and it not being an all top-down approach. So everyone's kind of got a stake in it. So for us, I also think that a lot of organizations like plan annually, and I don't think this sort of situation, you can't do that here. So as we're on a July 1 fiscal year, so as we look at budgeting and staffing and big decisions, we realize we're going to have to develop a process in which we kind of constantly look at and reevaluate based on the economic environment, based on are we able to get kids back up in programming, how is our fundraising going? So being collaborative, being flexible, being able to make some quick decisions. And in terms of managing our team, we're pretty fortunate that while we're dispersed, we've got people kind of all over the globe involved in all aspects of our programming and who participate on our leadership team. So we've already, we do a lot of the virtual conversations to begin with. But I think a couple of key learnings are be really prepared. Like, people are on Zoom calls all the time. And I think as valuable as a service is, people also get tired of it. So the right balance of checking in with people and making it light and fun and having different people lead calls, but also don't spend more time than you need to, and really come prepared. So looking at, all right, we have a weekly staff leadership call that everyone kind of sends in their updates with key questions beforehand. And so we can address those on the call rather than spending the time with everyone giving their updates. The expectation is that people will have read them and will come prepared. And for me, being really mindful, people have different challenges. Some might be, have young kids at home. Some might, live in tight spaces. Our kids in our programs are, a lot of them, homes are not safe spaces for them. And so being really, mindful of that. I think another learning is, if you don't have a strong culture coming in, it's going to be really hard to adapt on the fly. So the organizations that not only survive, but thrive and strengthen out of this crisis are going to be the ones that had the real strong, organizational culture and teams and are very collaborative rather than vice versa.
Right. Yeah. The poll results are definitely telling here. It looks like about a third of organizations out there already have laid off people, and 3 out of 10 say not yet. So this is going to be a big question. I mean, Jack, how do you assess this? Staffing matters in times like this. How do you manage them?
Well, ideally, how I'd like to do it is take a look at our values and who we are as a department, what services are we here to provide, and find out how much money we're going to have through budget cuts and fund from those values. But sometimes working with cities, we have unions and structure that we have to follow, processes that we have to follow, and it leads to bumping. And I remember through the housing crisis in 2008, 2009, we went through a lot of layoffs, and there was a lot of fear. Staff were, really concerned about their lives being turned upside down, and through this bumping process, some things, people can get angry. So I think it's really important as leaders that we step up and communicate, be as transparent as we can with staff along the way, and share those conversations that are happening behind closed doors as much as we possibly can to staff.
I got you. Okay, terrific. All right, so let's move to our third section of the webinar, innovation for the future. So the three big points we want to share with folks are, number one, reassess your value proposition to the community. Number two, create your opportunity for reinvention. And number three, create more low-cost, high-volume programming. We actually touched on a couple of these things very briefly in the past few minutes, but so let's dive a little bit deeper here. So Lisa, you offer only travel teams right now. Moving forward, what impact do you think these safety concerns and fewer family resources will have, and how are you responding? I mean, could you get into the space of providing essentially in-town recreation leagues? Is it moving to more of local festivals? I mean, how exactly does the programming adjust?
I think for us, it's really keeping our brand intact. So maybe the space isn't necessarily for rec for us at this point, who's to say, but I do think it's getting creative and being the stewards of people's money when it comes to people committing to travel and still wanting to participate. We're trying to get kids into good colleges and to get them seen, and how can we work within the constraints of our leagues to get them to reorganize and to be more responsive to the needs. We had teams traveling to Canada and teams traveling to San Diego and teams traveling to Arizona. There's some things that leagues can do to be responsive and to essentially look at restructuring to ensure that there's still an opportunity for kids who are of that talent level, but it's not quite a financial strain that it has been in the past. I think we would be crazy to think that everybody's going to come out of this okay, no matter if you play top level or rec. I think we're going to see financial repercussions all over throughout our society. And so nobody's really going to be immune, and we need to be sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm. And the value proposition perhaps as well. I mean, one of the things we're seeing is that colleges are being crunched. Just yesterday, was it Cincinnati got rid of its men's soccer team? We're probably going to see a lot of other non-revenue sports cut, including soccer, in the coming months and years. So do you have to adjust? You talk about getting kids into colleges. Are you going to have to adjust your value proposition as to why parents should write the checks to support travel sports?
Yeah, I think everybody is going to have to look at what products we're offering to people and how it continues to make sense as the landscape evolves almost at a daily rate right now. We're looking at, with soccer programs being cut in colleges and how we look at the recruiting process in general, what it's going to look like. So yeah, looking definitely at what the advantages of kids participating in sports at this level. Is it college? Is it playing professionally? Is it actually helpful in them when it comes to how successful they're going to be in college, regardless if they actually play on a team? Are we going to see more club programs outside of colleges? Europe, where soccer takes a precedent, doesn't have college sports. So maybe we see a model in the United States that starts to look more like Europe, or we could swing the other way and create something that is completely unique to the United States.
Mm-hmm. If it goes that direction, you talked about the more European model. Where does that leave travel teams in this country? Clubs, are they in a better position or worse?
Yeah, that's been the question, the age-old question, which is we want to be like Europe, but there are a lot of things that make us truly American. So how do we create the best product that appeals to our society, that appeals to the people that participate and love sports in the United States? And how can we capture that and create something that engages both the American passion, but the talent level and the product that they're getting in Europe?
Mm-hmm. Jack, what about you? How do you find your opportunity for reinvention? I know a few things from the last recession, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I again think that this is going to be a slow process in recovery, and I agree with Lisa that there's going to be some financial hardship all across the board. So we may have to look at different types of partnerships. Where maybe we're providing a facility and somebody else is providing programming or that youth sports programming aspect. But we need to be open to all ideas and look at what's best and what serves the public the best.
Mm-hmm. And how do we prevent what happened in the last recession? We know that between 2008 because we track this data at Aspen. 2008 and 2014, regular participation in sports among kids ages 6 to 12 fell from 45% down to 38%, and it really hasn't recovered since then. It sort of stayed at that level. It seems like the same thing could happen this time as well. Families with money could, continue to support the travel team environment, but the families that are reliant on low cost local park and recs type programming, who knows what's there for them. So how do we do that, and what's the role of each of your organizations in preventing that from happening? Lisa?
Well, preventing that from happening is a good question. I think, like I said before, it really comes down to the innovation and the ability to pivot. If you are so stuck in a way of doing business, there is a good chance that you will not be able to continue because you're not going to be able to move fast enough. So, as with this particular crisis, as with many, this is an opportunity for you as an organization to evaluate what you do well, and what your product is, and how you can reinvent yourself, how you can take things to new levels, where this has been great for us because it's really pushed some things and forced us to have dialogue with how we coach, why we coach, how we connect with young people, and how do we do it. This is, when now you have to set up a Zoom call where coaches talk to their players face to face. It's not on a field. It's not coach to player so much as now we're really communicating as humans. And we want our coaches to be those mentors for young people. And right now, when they're missing so much in their personal lives, their proms, their graduations, their friends, it's great to still have a relationship with a coach. And you think back to the best coaches you've ever had, and they're the people who listen to you, the people that were there for you, the people, you probably don't even remember what your records were, but I think it's pushing us as youth sports providers to be better humans and to be better mentors and be better role models for people.
And Park and Recs, Jack, have gone through an evolution, as you know. I mean, originally they were providers of local, low cost, high volume programming in town recreation leagues and so forth. Then budgets got cut, and they started using their, renting out those spaces to local clubs and otherwise. So how can Park and Recs, reclaim, and I know some of them, of course, still provide some of that programming, claim more of that space? How can they meet the demand that we anticipate there will be for that type of programming?
Well, I think it's important to start that dialogue with elected officials right now about how youth sports, rec and park programs that are in community centers, that are in neighborhoods, will be a part of the rebuilding process from this when we do open. And our employees that work in those community centers, they are the trusted faces of those neighborhoods, and they provide a safe space. And I think that's important to communicate that to elected officials. When we're looking at budget restraints and budget cuts for 2021 coming off this, I'm sure police, fire, and health will not take budget cuts, and rightly so. But at that same time, we need to be a part of that discussion about what our value is and how we're going to be a big part of this recovery.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What about partnerships with schools? Is there more room for that moving forward?
Absolutely. I think you'll see more, centers without walls is what we call it. So we may not have a center in a neighborhood, but we come into a school and through a partnership and after school program, and we provide the recreation in that school, in their gym, in their classrooms at night. So I think you might see more and more of that.
Gotcha. And Lisa, are there certain innovations that are being introduced right now that we believe will stick with us as we move forward? You mentioned virtual training. That's happening right now. Do you see that once we come out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been something that we've seen such a return on investment for us, from our players. They love the idea of staying competitive even when they're not on the field. It's engaging with them at their level, which is through apps, through their phone. It's not big, long emails. They're getting something that's basically linking them to platforms that they're used to and essentially speaking their language more than we were before. So I absolutely think it's something that as an organization we'll continue to do and implement in other ways.
Yeah, terrific. Okay, good. We'd like to open this up for some questions.
I'd just like to add real quick, just a couple points. This is a real opportunity. I mean, one of the big challenges that, or kind of failures around the youth sports market has been a lack of access for kids that need it most, right? And whether that's because the programs are too expensive, they're not up and running in the areas, these kids aren't playing outside because of safety issues. But one of the challenges is not around lack of available spaces, right? But there is a lack of coordination between everyone, the users, the schools, the Parks and Rec. And this presents, I think, a real opportunity to get people working on the same page, to use technology to open the access for everybody to the different venues and facilities, and really an opportunity for a big turnaround, because youth sports has failed the majority of kids in our country, and definitely the kids that we work in the needy areas. And while there continue to, I think, the travel teams, some of them might not exist anymore, but that business will figure out a way. The question is who gets left behind, and how do we use public resources to benefit the kids that need it most. And that conversation absolutely needs to be had.
Yeah, right now too. All right, so let's bring in a few some questions from panelists. Jennifer. We're bringing Jennifer in to ask some questions. Not quite sure how they figured that out.
Guys.
There you are. Oh, you're off again. You're on mute, Jennifer.
Yeah. Okay, guys, sorry. I don't know why. We had so many technology challenges today. So thanks for folks submitting questions. We've had more than 100 questions come in, and they're still rolling in. So I'm going to do my best to try and keep up. But obviously, lots of questions are around when we're going to return to play. And while I wish all three of you or all four of you had a crystal ball and can predict the future, perhaps you can tell us what advice or what you're looking to in terms of making that decision, or if you already have a plan for some segmented or staged return to play. Jack, could you start first, and then maybe Lisa and Brendan?
Yeah, well, we've developed a number of different scenarios for, say, when we come back, if it's in June or if it's in August or September. And we're prepared for, there might be restrictions on, the size of gatherings at that time when we can come back. There's just a lot of variables. So obviously we're like everybody else, we're in a wait and see to follow guidelines from federal, state, and local governments and leadership on when and what we'll be able to do. There's just a lot of variables right now.
Lisa?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Obviously, we're looking to those who know best, our Health and Human Services Department here in Maryland and in Montgomery County. But we have been working through models of, what would look like June 1st being a potential versus, what would July, what type of programming could we get in July, and then a season starting in August. And then also on the reverse, a potential for what if we don't have a season that starts until next spring. So, being realistic, but also looking to the governing bodies to try and figure out whether it's U.S. club soccer or U.S. youth soccer, what types of programming they might be able to offer over the summer if we do end up being able to get back on the field.
What I fear is just, again, a lack of collaboration. So I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is about 5 minutes from Washington, D.C., which is about 20 minutes from Virginia, right? So our different states going to have different, different rules or different timing. And then you're also looking at a potential, what happens in the fall in terms of if there is another outbreak, and how do we best plan for that? So I'm hopeful, but not necessarily optimistic that we're going to be able to figure this out. I think there are going to be lots of stops and starts.
Great. And obviously refunds were a very hot topic, both in our poll questions and amongst the panel. A couple of questions that came in on that topic again. How many folks were looking at refunds as a donation? And I know, Jack, that's something that's difficult for you guys to do, but is that something that you would consider in the future? And then in return, Lisa and Brendan, are you guys asking for refunds from perhaps your insurers because you won't be taking advantage of that in the near future?
So we actually had a group that we refunded $1,300 to for unused time. That was a for-profit youth group that turned around and donated that and told us to use it for youth sports access. So although we can't ask for those, we just have to process the refund. We can't ask for it. We've had several people do that with smaller amounts as well. So that is happening. People do recognize and they do want to help as well. So we appreciate that.
Lisa, from the business perspective, are you asking for refunds from any services that you won't be taking advantage of?
I would say asking, yes, expecting, who knows. It's essentially, we're all connected by a thread. And when you pull from one, it starts to pull from the one connected to it. And we start asking for refunds. Obviously, we have a lot of programming from our leagues we participate in, we front pay. So asking now to return what was not delivered from those leagues, we may or may not see those refunds. And then we are not able to then pass it to a parent if we're not actually able to get it into our club. So there definitely are some constraints that we face as an organization. And then looking also, to everything from what you're paying for your taxes for your employees to your insurance. If you end up laying people off, you're going to want to contact your insurers to make sure that you have the correct numbers of employees that you have. Look for small ways to save money for sure. Make sure that if you're not in your office, did somebody turn the heat off so you're not continuing to pay it while you're there?
And I'll take it from the opposite end. So we have, we receive contributions from individuals and corporations and foundations, and so, several of those are structured so it's funded, for specific future program activities. So we're having those conversations with our grantors and talking through with them about how we're adapting. Talking through about potential shifts and how that funding was designated. And again, having open and transparent conversations on the front end, not waiting for them to come to us.
Great. And I think there are a lot of questions in this space too around how are we going to ensure that we continue to create low cost opportunities for young people to return when we can return to sport, and how the flow of dollars in the industry might look different. So Jack, can you start with that? And then maybe we'll go to Brendan and Lisa.
Yeah, I think, again, it's about communication and being transparent and starting those conversations now. We actually had a conversation on Monday internally about looking 6-9 months out from now and even into next year. How can we subsidize even more? How can we communicate that, we're already a low cost, we offer low cost leagues at $35 to $60, but how can we subsidize those even more? And in anticipation of what's going to happen out there in the communities and neighborhoods, and offer free programming. So I think that we need to start to work on that now. Brendan says he receives donations and stuff. That's something that we need to look at. Sponsorships might not be there, but donations may be. So we may need to look at that and how we can get that accomplished.
And I think you're also maybe going to see a return to, and Tom talks about this all the time, but a return to more free play and not everything has to be organized, and creating more opportunities for kids to be able to do that, as well as organizations like all of ours making the case to cities and state governments that are responsible for allocation of funding around sports and recreation. The positive impact that sport plays a role, in kids' lives, especially, kids in needy communities. Because I think, unfortunately, what we're going to see is, as we talked about before, cuts in funding. So A, we need to protect that, and B, as the economy rights itself in the hopefully not too distant future, really band together to make the case and open people's eyes and understand the critical needs that sports do play in everyday lives, particularly of the most marginalized.
And this is a great place to bring Tom back in, because the statistic that you quoted, Tom, on the downturn in the downturn in participation in the last recession, folks would love for you to repeat it and then make your prediction for what you see in the future. Oh, you're muted, Tom.
So this is data from the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. They do a national survey. They've been doing it for a long time of parents. And they found that kids ages 6 to 12, 45% of them were regularly playing team sports in 2008. That fell to 38% by 2014. And then it's pretty much stayed there ever since then. Through a lot of effort, a lot of groups, we've stabilized it collectively, but it hasn't gone up and it hasn't gone down. I think it absolutely could see another drop that's similar, because we're going to be going through not just a recession, but now we have these safety concerns related to COVID. Do I want to put my kid in that environment? Are we going to be, is the virus, is it safe for me? Is it safe for my child? I think these are going to be real considerations. I think it'll particularly have a bite on the travel industry, because you're moving kids across lines all over the place. How comfortable are states and municipalities, in creating those kinds of environments? How comfortable are parents sending their kids away and not exactly sure where they're staying and what kind of environment they're stepping into? So I think it absolutely could go that direction, but I think this all comes down to leadership. I don't think it has to. I think there's actually a way to get more kids playing for less than the $19 billion that is supposedly spent right now on youth sports in this country. By really committing to local, low-cost programming that is provided by, partner recs, nonprofits. Schools are going to be a real key player there. At one point, they were providers of low-cost programming back when the intramurals were, baked into the school system. When PE was more common, when the freshman teams, middle school teams, the privatized recreation environment has really chipped away at that. And schools have moved to a pay-for-play model. So even if it's $300 or $400, that's prohibitive to a lot of families. So I think it can be done. I think it's going to come down to leadership and not just waiting for the current system to come back, but to say there really been 4 stages of youth sports in this country going back 100 years. And I'm not going to bore you with each one of those stages, but what do we want this? There have been 3 stages so far, but what do we want this 4th stage to be? That's going to be a matter of thought leadership, developing a framework. And look, we already have the Project Play 8 strategy for the 8 sectors. I think it'll be something more similar to that, where free play is baked in, more in-town rec leagues, being more dialed into truly what kids want and need, as opposed to what parents want and need. I think there are ways to create sticky, attractive programming that will lead to sustained experiences that at much lower cost, but it's going to take a reset in our thinking about why we're here and what we can do.
Great. Thanks. And I think for those of you that are interested in thinking more about what Tom sees for the future, be sure to check out our website, where he has written a piece that I think frames a lot of the opportunities of this moment. Moving us along, because there have been a lot of questions just around the technical aspect of going virtual. Lisa, I want to start with you first. Can you tell us a little bit about what type of virtual academy you've set up for your athletes? And then Brendan and then Jack, if you guys could chime in about how you guys are staying engaged with folks on virtual platforms.
Absolutely. Our virtual academy is something that we're actually really, really proud of. We and it's something that's kind of proprietary to us, so only our members have access to it, which is a benefit we're offering to our particular players and parents. What we've done is essentially looked at what are the best tools on the market. We've partnered with an online app, and I never know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's called Techne, Techne, and it essentially offers a competition format for players to do different types of drills, and there's a leaderboard so they can still play games against each other, all through an app on their phones. And then we also partnered with a local company called Healthy Baller, who is a strength and conditioning company, to do some unique content for some training videos that we've put together. We talked about whether you're using WebEx or Zoom or Google Hangout, ways to keep your coaches connected to your players, to really put it in their hands and give them opportunity to do stuff while they're at home and to still feel like they're a part of a team. Because no matter who you are, it's the team feeling I think the kids are missing a lot. They miss their friends, they miss being a part of a team. And so how can you keep them working on honing their craft, but at the same time offer the social experience as well? So we found offering a lot of components and still keeping them updated on college recruiting, providing resources from our partner organizations like Sports Recruits, to just give people information, and then work with their parents, because we're giving the kids a lot. What are we offering parents? How can parents support kids at this time? How can we partner with, we've got a group called Soccer Parenting we work with. You guys, Aspen Institute, we try and pass along information that we think is valuable to our parents. So it's really a holistic approach using cutting edge technology.
Great. And Jack, for Parks and Recs, what have you guys done in the virtual space? And how do you think it might change the industry as a whole?
Well, I definitely think virtual meetings are here to stay, but we are trying to take advantage of some video training for our staff. We're still hiring people, like in the process of hiring lifeguards, because we have to anticipate that pools will be open at some point. So we're doing some virtual training there, as well as just with normal staff training and cleaning facilities and different things they need to learn from an onboarding perspective. But we're also doing some things where we're doing the Get Fit videos, and we're taking advantage of a little bit of what everybody else is putting out there on how to stay fit and how to keep exercising, how to hone your skills. We're trying to put that on one website and generate that out to all of our participants, especially in the youth sports area. And then from a travel team industry, we know that they are craving to get back out on the fields and play. We actually started a podcast where we're communicating with our tournament directors and getting to know a little bit more about the tournament directors and the actual events that they do, and just staying engaged with people on that end. But I will say this about the virtual meetings. I loved what Brendan had to say earlier. In fact, I actually wrote it down. Come prepared for those meetings, and we don't. It seems to me like we're overdoing it with Zoom meetings. Everybody, when I was at work, there was maybe 2 or 3 meetings a day. Now it seems like we have 7 or 8 a day that are on Zoom. So I'd like to everybody to calm down with that a little bit.
Well, we promise that we won't go over the 1 hour that we set aside for this Zoom meeting. But Brendan, if you could make some comments about how you think the youth sport industry is going to change based upon this, now this influx of technology, and ways that you see technology supporting not just physical development, but the social, emotional, and kind of team aspect of sports as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it will never be a replacement, but hopefully it'll be in addition to. And, we're in this crisis pretty deep. I don't know that anybody knows, what the world is going to be, a year or 2 from now. And people can make predictions. Some things are going to, change them. Some things are going to go back. But obviously, the use of technology is really key. Whether it means, how organizations like, nonprofit organizations like PeacePlayers or Bethesda Soccer, or how Parks and Rec use to just, again, especially on the coordination and access issue. And again, in order to do my job, I have to be an optimist. And I think both individually, organizations like all of us represented, and the industry, while we're going to go through really tough times, this is an opportunity for us all, not only to get better and invest on, our teams and staff and training, but also around collaboration, because this space is very, very fragmented and it doesn't have to be. So I really view this as an opportunity. Technology will play a role. It'll never be the answer. I mean, one of the things we're going through is we've got programs in several U.S. cities. Let's also not overthink it. Like we're encouraging our coaches to get on the phone and call and check in every day with your kids. A lot of them don't have great internet access or don't know how to do Zoom. So let's not overthink things either. But again, I would really hope that without being too pie in the sky, that we're able to use this opportunity to get better and use technology in a way to both support and connect all of our work, and really, particularly on the access issue.
Terrific. All right. Jennifer, do you have a follow-up?
I was going to say, I don't think we have time for any more questions, so I was going to ask you to close this out.
Got it. I'll do it. All right, listen, so thank you to all of our panelists, to our team, John, Jennifer, Marty, Fumi, Ranyan, and Emily, and to you, our Project Play Network. We will host more of these webinars in the coming weeks and months, all leading up to the Project Play Summit on October 14th in Washington, D.C., where we hope to gather as many of you as possible in person, taking next steps in reimagining youth and school sports. Also, a reminder to please sign up for our newsletter. That's where we will be showing or sharing upcoming webinars for leaders, parents, coaches, and others, and where we will dive deep into strategies to navigate these uncertain times and empower you to be effective agents of change. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday, April 22nd, when we will focus on what kids want from coaches now. Stay tuned for forthcoming registration, or actually I got a little text from Marty here saying you can register now at as.pn/COVID-19 sports webinar 3. Again, as.pn/COVID-19 sports webinar 3. So stay safe, be well, and we will see you soon.